Well, Tony, great to catch up. It's been a while and appreciate seeing you again. Now, velvet, of course, is an intriguing topic, and tell us, what's the lay of the land, as it were, with velvet at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Velvet has it started with a bang as far as on-farm production goes, a really early start this year, but the sales themselves have been slow, but now I'm pleased to say that there's been some real strong demand around the Christmas and post-Christmas time that's basically cleared a lot of the stocks. That was something that we couldn't foresee, and I guess, with venison being in a difficult space, having those Europe and US restaurant trade market sector shut, really the important cash flow for velvet, for dairy farmers comes from velvet. So really important that we keep that momentum going. In relation to last season, our price is about 15 to 20% back, but that's fairly well measured when you look at the buyers having to have the challenges of logistics. We now have containers backed up, in transit that can't enter into northern China at the moment, and so that potentially puts a lot of delay for their cash flows out the other end to get the product processed. So, all in all, I think most people are fairly comfortable that velvet has sold, and that also consumption hasn't been really affected that bad, which is a real plus, and that gives us some optimism for the future.
How can you tell, or can you tell, if it's going to be a good season or not? Is it all weather dependent, or what makes for growing velvet?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think daylight, sun, daylight hours and sun is the critical thing, as well as feeding. 50% of the product is probably made up out of genetics and feeding. And we've had a reasonably mild winter, and coming into the spring with that early season growth, that's when the velvet really gets its opportunity to flourish. And so, yeah, that's great to have an early start, but also the market, it's not always so early, and it wasn't this season. Back in October, November, there was talk that there was already stock in the market. They didn't need the product, but as I said, by December, January, there was really some gaps starting to open.
And when you transport it, when you head it off to Asia or wherever its destination may be, does it have to be refrigerated, or does it go in a standard container?
Yeah, it's definitely refrigerated in the form of frozen. So those containers generally sit around the -18, -20 mark. A small percentage does go air freight overnight to places like South Korea, but that's really for the higher value, high end stuff that's already being processed in New Zealand, which probably only accounts for, let's say, 20 to 30%.
Now, the actual tonnage has jumped up too quite a bit, and there's a reason for that. Has it had a change in its, how do you put it, how it's specified, if you like?
Yeah, the historical cap for New Zealand deer velvet production was always around 500 tonne. For the last 10 years, we've had stable to steadily appreciating prices. And that's really been because there's been a change in the market, mainly South Korea, with the healthy food sector. And that means that New Zealand deer velvet is actually getting recognition for being in branded products and sold for a premium off the shelf or online, rather than having the traditional Oriental medical doctor prescribe that with a mixture of herbs to the consumers. So, we've got to... We're not told a lot by our buyers. There's a big distance between New Zealand and Korea and China, our main markets. But from what we can learn, and also not being able to visit because of COVID is a bit of a disadvantage. But we're pretty confident that consumption is actually increasing, and we're keeping pace with that. It's going to be more important going forward now, though, that we do look at ways of diversifying away from just South Korea. And
you've also just started a collaboration. Can you tell us a wee bit about that? It's a combination of different sectors, if you like.
Yeah, that's right. That sort of leads on from my point that we need to diversify away from South Korea, where we've got an added value product that's getting brand recognition, but there's not one currently in the China market, and yet we've got such a huge population, a great brand image with China, and also we see the potential to really capture some value there. So it's not going to be easy from the importation regulatory side. It's not easy to get into China, particularly when you're looking at further added value products. So we're going to combine with two of our competitors here in New Zealand, Provalco Co-op and CK Import Export, as well as getting some funding from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and assistance from Dairy Industry New Zealand. It's a pretty big marriage, but we're going to together try and develop and grow that China market for New Zealand deer velvet. And we've already started that by employing a business development manager. They'll be based in Shanghai, and they've got some really good credentials to be able to sell our brand and hopefully find an opportunity to develop a product that we don't know about yet.